So in 7.2, we're going to be talking about circles. We're going to be analyzing graphing equations of circles. And we're going to make sure we understand how to get it into standard form. What is standard form? Everything we can about the equations of circles. Now, the general form for the equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Now, let's analyze what all of those pieces mean. Okay? If we look at a circle is all points that are equidistant from a given point. And so that length or that distance that we are from a given point is our radius. And the center is the point that we kind of measured from. In this particular equation, your center is always the opposites of what you see here. You'll notice in the formula it says negative h and negative k. That just means the opposite of hk. So our center is hk. R is our radius. You always have to take the square root of that number right there. So this formula we're going to use again and again, so make sure you understand what your center is and what your radius is. So let's look at our first example. It says, write an equation of a circle with center negative 611 and that touches the y-axis. So let's first write down the general formula for a circle. So it's going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Now, in this particular set of instructions, they want us to find the equation that has a center at negative 611. So we know that this is h and this is k. But one thing they didn't tell us was the r. But they gave us a very good hint. They said that it's going to touch the y-axis. So here's our y-axis. So let's label the point negative 611. I'm sorry my graph paper is not very helpful with that, but it would be about there. That's our center. Label it with a C. And then it touches the y-axis. Well, for it to touch the y-axis, then we have to be an exact distance away from the center of 6 units. So that means this is a point on our circle. So the radius now has to be 6. To draw the circle, we need at least 4 points. From the center, count 6 up, 6 down, 6 left, and 6 right. And then draw your circle. And I cannot draw circles very well. As you can tell, even Notability has trouble recognizing that I'm trying to draw a circle. Okay, you get the general idea, right? Now, we've drawn the circle. Now let's go ahead and fill in the information about our circle. We know the h is negative 6, so this is the opposite of h. The k is 11. This is the opposite of 11. And we found by drawing it that our radius was 6, so this is 6 squared. Usually they don't leave this squared on the equation, So they'll do x plus 6 squared, y minus 11 squared equals 36. So we have found an equation of a circle with center negative 6, 11 that touches the y-axis. And you could always take and put this equation as is into Desmos and make sure you get the center at negative 6, 11 and a radius of 6, or that you touch that y-axis. So there's example 1. Now let's move on to example 2.
Can you scroll back up for a second?
Sure.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay. Now let's look at example 2. It says find the equation of a circle with diameter 10 and center negative 1, 3. So what we know is that our general form is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So our h would be negative 1, our k would be positive 3. Now the thing we have to remember is that the radius is half the diameter. So if they told us that the diameter of our circle is 10, then the radius will be half of 10, or in this case, our radius is 5. So once we know our h and our k and our r, we just need to place it into the formula. So let's go ahead and do that. Our h is negative 1, so the formula, it's the opposite of h, so that's going to be plus 1. Our k is going to be the opposite of 3, which is negative 3. And our radius is 5, so that's going to be 5 squared. Now let's actually square that 5, and then our equation is good to go. 5 squared is 25, so let's write that as 25. So now we have the equation of our circle. The last thing, let's go ahead and draw it. Let's go to the point negative 1, 3. Put a dot, label it with a C for center. Our radius is 5, so we're going to count up 5, down 5, left 5, and right 5 from the center, and do your best to make something that looks like a circle. You can't go any worse than what I attempted to do. See, it just doesn't even like me. Okay? So there is example 2. Any questions about that one? Okay, let's go to example 3. It says to graph x squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 9. Now, you might want to think about rewriting this. So you could rewrite it as x minus 0 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 3 squared. Now, you don't have to, but it's helpful because then we see our h, we see our k, and we see our r all together. So our h is the opposite of 0, which is 0. Our k is the opposite of negative 2, which is positive 2. So our center is at the point 0, 2. Our radius is sitting right here. R squared is 9, or 3 squared. So r is 3. Now that we know all the pieces and parts, let's graph our circle. We're going to go over to the point 0, 2. So we're going to go 0 left and right, but then up 2. So that just puts us on the y-axis at the point 2. Now from there, count 3 up, 3 down, 3 left, 3 right. And so 3 up. Oh, let's label that as center. 3 down, 3 to the left, 3 to the right. Make a circle. You're good to go. Okay? There's example 3. Let's keep going. Now example 4 is our last set of examples. We have 2 of them. They're the most difficult because the equation isn't in standard form. It requires that we use a technique called completing the square. So let's go ahead and practice completing the square and getting this all ready. So let's start with A. Now remember what we're shooting for here. Our standard form is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Okay? So we need 2 sets of perfect squares, and then that equals our number, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, this is the way you want to do it every time. You want to write all of the x's in descending order. If there is 2 x's, then you're going to put a blank. I put a plus blank. Then you're going to write the y's. Now the y's don't have any more y's, so you don't need a plus blank. And then you're going to write your number, and then you're going to put a blank, because however many blanks you have on the left, you have to keep your equation balanced. We need a blank on the right. Okay. Now, how do we complete the square? Well, you might have done this in an Algebra 1 class. We're going to complete this square by using this number as our guide. Put a parenthesis with a square on it. You're always going to use half of this number right here. So you start out with your x, not a square, just an x, and then half of this number. Now this number is positive 4, half of that is plus 2. Now think about if we physically squared that. X plus 2 times x plus 2, we would always have 2 times 2 in the back. So 2 squared should always fill this spot. Now what is 2 squared? 4. So put a 4 on the other side. Now the y was already squared. You can put that little minus 0 there to remember that the y part of your center is 0. You don't have to. It's kind of your choice. And then 9 plus 4 is 13. We have just put it into standard form. Not too bad, right? And you always want to follow that pattern. Now let's pull out our center and our radius, and then we'll graph it. Our center is the opposite of h, and the opposite, or negative h is right there. So the opposite of that will be h. The opposite of that will be k. So that point is negative 2, 0. Our radius is the square root of whatever number you see there. That's the square root of 13. Now, I don't know what the square root of 13 is. It's 3 something, 3 point something. You need it for the graphing purposes, so you want to throw that into a calculator. That's approximately 3.6. So now we have everything we need. Let's go ahead and actually graph it. So you're going to go to the point negative 2, 0, which is on the x-axis. From there, count 3.6 up, 3.6 down, 3.6 to the left, 3.6 to the right. Make a circle. Okay? I'm just an excellent circle drawer. I know. Now, we have one more to go. Let's do the same thing for part B. It's the most difficult. Save the best for last, I guess, huh? Okay. So we're going to write the x's together in descending order. Since there are two x's, put a blank. We're going to put the y's together in descending order. Since there's two y's, we're going to put a blank. And then we're going to move the 4 to the other side of the equation. It becomes a negative 4. But we need 2 blanks on the left and 2 blanks on the right. Okay? Now that's just kind of the setup so that I have everything ready to kind of place my information into so I can get this right. So this is the number that's going to help me with the x's. So put a little square under your x's, put a little square under your y's. Okay, that's just kind of getting ready. For my x's, you put an x here, half of this number. Now we can just put the actual half of it. You can do that on a calculator if you want. Negative 4.5 is half of 9, negative 9. But when we square it, remember it's always positive. So this is going to be 4.5 squared. I never even put the sign. I know it's going to be positive. And over here, let's put what 4.5 squared is. 4.5 squared is 20.25. Okay. Now let's do the same thing for our y's. This number is the key. Half of that number is negative 4. So y minus 4 is going to go there. 4 squared fills that spot. 4 squared is 16. Okay. Now, let's combine all those things. Negative 4 plus 20.25 plus 16 is 32.25. Do I care that it's not a great number? No, not in the least. Okay. Now, we're ready to go. We're in standard form. Let's pull out our center. Let's pull out our radius, and then let's graph it. So our center is the opposite of what we see there and there. So instead of negative 4.5, it's positive 4.5. Instead of negative 4, it's positive 4. And our radius is the square root of 32.25. Let's round to the nearest tenth. It's really hard to graph anything more accurately than that. Even that's difficult. The square root of 32.25 is approximately 5.7. Okay? So now we have everything we need to graph it. So let's go back up to our graph paper. So go to 4.54. So 4.5 and then up 4. Label with the center. I forgot to label my center before. Try to remember to do that. We're going to count 5.7 up, down, left, and right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.7 takes me just slightly off the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.7 takes me slightly over that line. 5.7 up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.7 takes me about right here. And then 5.7 down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.7 takes me about right there. Try to make a circle. Okay, so there is example 4. Now let's take a look at your homework. Your homework has 8 problems on it. Okay. The first 4 are a little bit on the easier side because of the fact that they have given you a center and the radius. Please give me the equation in standard form and tell me the center and the radius if they didn't already do so, and then graph each one of these. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, I don't expect that you'll have much in the way of problems. You might want to write on the top of your page x minus 8 squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Okay, that can help guide you. But what I would like to do now is I would like to do number 5 together. Okay, so let's do number 5 from the homework. So this is not in standard form. You can't really tell what the center or radius is, and so let's get it all ready. Now, I don't like the fact that these are over here, so I might have to rearrange a little bit. So let's get the x's together. So we're going to have to add 14x to get it to move. So we're going to put the x's together, plus a blank. We're going to put the y's together, plus a blank. We're going to leave the number on the other side, but it needs 2 blanks. Okay. Let's put the perfect squares underneath. And let's get started. For the x, this is the key number. Half of that number fills my spot. So half of 14 is 7. 7 squared goes here. And now physically do 7 squared. 7 squared is 49. So put it on the right side. Now let's complete the squares for our y's. For our y's, the key number is this middle number, 6. Half of 6 is 3. So 3 squared fills that spot. Now let's physically do 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, so put a 9 over there. And if you actually add all that up, negative 50 plus 49 plus 9 is really 58 minus 50, or 8. Now, one of the keys to knowing you did it right, you should get a positive number in that spot. So what do we know our center is? Our center are the opposites of those two numbers, so negative 7 and negative 3. Our radius is going to be the square root of 8, which isn't a perfect square. We did that one a little earlier. It's approximately 2.8. Now let's graph it. We're going to go to the point negative 7, negative 3, put a dot, label it with a C for center. Our radius is 2.8, so we're going to count 2.8 up, 2.8 down, 2.8 to the left, 2.8 to the right, make something that slightly resembles a circle. Okay? Let's do one more of these. Let's do number 8 together, please. Okay, for number 8, we're going to get the x's together. So these are the x's. We're going to write them in descending order. They were kind of ready for us, plus a blank. Now we need to move our y's to the other side, so they're going to switch signs. So the negative y squared is going to become a positive y squared. Your positive 16 should become a negative 16y. We need a blank. The 84 is going to scooch over to the right and become a negative 84. I had 2 blanks on the left, so I need 2 blanks on the right. Now let's get ready. Make a perfect square underneath the x's, perfect square underneath the y's, and let's go for it. For the x's, here's our key number. Half that number goes underneath, so x minus that number. 6 squared fills the spot, so a 36 goes on the right. 6 squared is 36. Now let's do it for this one. So here's our key number. Half of negative 16 is negative 8. Negative 8 squared, which is positive 8 squared, is 64. Now on the right side, we have a negative 84 plus a 36 plus a 64, which is 16. I just threw that in the calculator, add those up. And now we're ready to find the center and the radius. So our center, remember, is the opposites of the numbers we see here. So the opposite of -6 is 6. The opposite of -8 is 8. The radius is the square root of 16. This time it comes out nice. It's 4. Now we have everything we need to graph it. My graph paper is going to be a little too small, but anytime that happens, just kind of extend the paper a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go to 6, 8. We're going to put a dot. We're going to label it with a C. Okay. We're going to count up 4, down 4, left 4, right 4. I'm going to make a circle. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for me?